Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast, the podcast where a high schooler can learn to turn their passion into a business.
Today we have on the co-founder and co-CEO of Jabbrrbox, Jeremy Jennings. Jeremy is a seasoned entrepreneur with 20 years of experience behind him and has worked in the fashion retail and commercial interiors industries. Recently, he has started working on his own company, Jabbrrbox, which makes the Jabbrrbox, a 4-foot square chamber that is often described as the modern-day phone booth. The Jabbrrbox is intended to provide the mobile workforce with a space to take business calls, privacy, and Wi-Fi.
Read 3 takeaways for this episode.
The first takeaway is, what's to come for the mobile workforce?
The second, why passion is important in entrepreneurship.
And finally, why it's so important to have a job at a young age and what it can teach you. Before we get started, Mr. Jennings, we would like to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on to our show. It means a lot to us.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here, and what I think you guys are doing is super cool. So, thank you guys.
No problem. Mr. Jennings, please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into entrepreneurship.
Sure. So I'll try to make a long story somewhat short and concise. Coming out of school, when I did, there was really only a couple of tracks you could go on. When I graduated back in the mid-90s, really it was, you kind of went into a corporate world, or there was like other. It was, and the other path was kind of few and far between. So I chose to take a corporate path, moved into New York City, and I got a job within a department store, Lord & Taylor, within their executive training program, learning how to be a merchant, learning how to be a buyer. Kind of grew up within that environment and became a buyer, and ultimately got tapped at a pretty young age to start a private label men's sportswear company out of nothing, a brand within a brand, a private label brand. So it was like myself, 2 designers, and a product manager, basically traveling the world and creating this assortment, creating a brand, learning all about, pricing, promotion, placement, marketing, figuring out who our demographic was. And it was my first true taste of entrepreneurship. And the best part about it, to be honest, it was on someone else's dime. The worst part about it is that I didn't own it. But that gave me kind of a taste of entrepreneurship. And then, I always went into any business with a mindset that I was an owner, whether I really owned equity or I was at least an owner in the accountability sense. So within, kind of growing up within retail, I had my mindset I was going to be a corporate CEO, certainly a corporate officer of some sort. Mm-hmm. And then over time, I went from Lord & Taylor to Gap Inc. Actually worked at Macy's for a short time. So I worked within 3 public companies. And while I always thought that I wanted to be a public CEO, or that was kind of like the prize in my eyes, as I got older and got more maybe experience, I had more opportunities to see the corporate bureaucracy. I became I realized that I really wasn't fit. It was incongruent with how I felt inside. And I started calling this I had a name for it. I felt like I was an entrepreneur in corporate clothing. So I was, if you guys, depending on what you do and where you go, if you're a lot of times within large organizations, there's like big milestone meetings, whether they're quarterly, even weekly, monthly, annually, and there's this huge scurry of activity, like the pre-meeting for the meeting, then you get in the meeting, and then it's a bunch of people sitting around listening to someone else talk and set the agenda, and then you have all this post-meeting activity. And what I realized at a pretty young age was that it absolutely drove me crazy, and I thought it was inefficient, and I thought there was so much wasted time and energy and value. And we started thinking about shareholders and the amount of effort that was going into kind of this bureaucratic wheel, and you realize how much shareholder value is actually being lost in this. And it just made me realize like I wanted to kind of steward my own ship, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
And so backtracking just a little bit, where did you go to school?
I went to SUNY Albany in upstate New York, Albany, New York.
And did you study business and marketing and finance when you were there?
Yeah, I was a double major, actually, Japanese as
Cool.
as language and communications, and then I was a business minor.
Right.
So I had a lot of exposure to a bunch of different types of classes and a lot of different experiences. One thing I love about just entrepreneurship in general is that you have so much opportunity. Like the world really is your oyster. And I put myself through school. I've had so many different types of jobs from the time I was 12 years old through today, and I think it all trains you to understand. When I was 12 years old, my first job was washing dishes in a steakhouse. I worked in restaurants as a busboy and waiter and bartender. Worked in one Christmas season. I worked in a UPS loading facility, and I worked the night shift because I needed Christmas money. So that was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever had, and it taught me a lot about what I didn't want to do in my life. But you had about 50 seconds when a truck came in to understand what was in the truck. You had 3 minutes to offload it, and then another 2 minutes before another truck came in, and you were just taking cardboard boxes and just manually moving them onto conveyor belts. And obviously that job is obviously being replaced in today's world. So I'm glad that wasn't my passion, but it certainly taught me a lot.
Yeah, and I think experiences like that when you're young, different kinds of jobs, definitely helps shape your mold to what you become when you're older. So do you think that having all those jobs and experiences when you were young helped you figure out that in the earlier stage of your life that you wanted to take your own path and take your journey under your own hands?
Yeah, I think what it taught me was that really no one controls your destiny other than you. And it taught me that, accountability is something I really believe in. I have three young kids, 4, 5, and 10 years old. And I try to pass on to them a lot about accountability and things don't happen to you. For example, you're walking by a table, the milk didn't fall off the table. You bumped into the table and the milk fell. So you have to be accountable for your actions and what happens around you, and you control that. So you don't become a victim of circumstance. Life is tough. And there's a lot of great business books and philosophy books and life books about that life is challenging and life is difficult and life is struggle. One of the best books I can ever recommend is Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And startups are challenging and struggle. Relationships are hard. One day if you guys, have a significant other more so than you do today, relationships are tough, whether they're intimate relationships, business partners, vendors, clients. Relationships are hard. Anything that is of value and of substance, it requires that difficulty. So I think so. Back to your question, accountability, there's different types of jobs that give you a sense that you can control your destiny, and that if you believe in yourself, there really truly are no limits. The only limits are the ones you put on yourself.
Right, and that's something that is very important to realize as a young entrepreneur.
Going back to Jabbrrbox, so can you explain to our listeners what is Jabbrrbox and why you founded it?
Sure. This is always a fun one on a podcast, because you're trying to describe a physical product and a digital service and all these things. But basically, in your intro, you're right. It's essentially a modern day phone booth. It's a modular pod or vessel. And the quick founding story, so I have a co-founder, very good friend, one of my closest friends in the world, Brian Hackathorn, who I've known since 2006. We've worked together professionally in different formats. We've, personal friends, family friends. And his last role before Jabbrrbox, he was a principal of an architectural firm in New York. He grew up in like a design build mentality. He's always thinking about, design and space and how people interact and interface with these things.
Yeah.
And Jabbrrbox is really born out of personal need. And Brian, to his credit, he was in between meetings in Manhattan, in New York City, and he had some downtime. So he went to this, it's called a POPS location, which is a privately owned public space, and it's open to the general public. And he went in there and he sat down and he watched how people were interacting with the environment. And he saw the construction workers looking for power. He saw, students on the phone, business person kind of like trying to close a deal, a professional services person like with papers thrown out on a table. And he just thought, like, we need a modern day phone booth. Like, technology has given us the ability to work in all kinds of environments. And it's not just home or work anymore. It's not home, work, Starbucks, WeWork, like your third place of choice. Like, you can work anywhere. You can work on the floor of a subway. You can work, sitting in your hall at home. I'm not sure where you guys are doing your podcast, but it's probably, you can do it almost anywhere, right? So he wrote down this idea of modern day phone booth and shared it with me a couple of weeks later over lunch, and it just hit me over the head as something that was so timely, and I saw it so clearly. And I came back to him with, same day with essentially, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Zipcar or not, but the idea of Zip. Okay, so Zipcar is essentially, it was a successful early startup back in 2001 by Robin Chase, and she actually created this idea of fractionalized cars. So she saw this inventory, glut of inventory that, in her own driveway, her car sat there for, essentially it was only used like 1 or 2 hours a day. And if you thought about it, like that's 22 hours a day of underutilized inventory, creates like a ton of waste, it's unsustainable, all the things that go along with like this inventory glut. So she's like, well, what if other people use my car when I wasn't using it? So, which seems so like logical today, but 17, 18 years ago, it was revolutionary essentially. So she started Zipcar, and I came back and it kind of shows our age. I'm going to be 45 this year. Brian is 45, so we're not your 22-year-old founders. But I came back with this idea of like Zipcar for space to Brian, and I said these modern day phone booths should be everywhere, and they should be community based and accessible to anyone that becomes a member, because you want to have this idea of community, and it should be available in short increments of time. So the idea of Zipcar is that if you only needed a car for an hour, just pay for an hour. Like, why are you buying a, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 car to use it 2 hours a day, especially if you live in an urban environment? Why don't you just pay like $50 and get the same car for that time? And that's kind of the idea, the initial idea of Jabbrrbox is like, okay, well, let's create this modern day phone booth, and let's put them in loud and busy environments where people need privacy. So that's airports and commercial building lobbies and convention centers and stadiums and even like Starbucks. So even wherever people are doing work and hanging out, but they need privacy, that's where Jabbrrbox can be. And it can be, community based, where it's available to anyone. Become a member, and you get access in increments of 15 minutes at a time, and you're only paying for the time you use.
There's no essential waste. It's not inventory waste like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. So, the idea, a lot of people, like in the airport space, so we're live in 4 airports today. Our plans are to be live in 25 terminals by the end of the year, and we see, the opportunity to launch, thousands of these units across the globe. And the idea is that it's this kind of mini office or mini private space, like whatever you need it to be is your own private space. for short increments of time. We're live in LaGuardia Airport, for example. If you check out our social feed at Jabbrrbox, Jabbrrbox, Bobby Brown Rock and Roll BOX. There are images of people using the space. I think 2 weeks ago, someone was practicing a violin in this case. It's only a 4 foot by 4 foot space, but it's truly for whatever you need to do. Certainly most people use it for, productivity reasons, like taking a phone call, a video call, emails, podcasts, like things like that. However, you see a lot of people using it for other use cases. Practicing a violin is one that I didn't see coming, but it's the funniest part about it is the second instrument that we've seen in there. The first, I think someone was practicing a trumpet. So it's interesting.
And so, speaking to what you said about planning on building out where they are, it seems as though they're pretty popular in airports. I know personally, if I had work to do in an airport, I would probably find myself using one. What other locations are you guys targeting to place them?
Sure. So we're actually live in a commercial office building lobby, like in a public space within the commercial building at the Chicago Merchandise Mart in downtown Chicago. And what you're seeing happen in a lot of public spaces is they're becoming more hospitality oriented, meaning that it's just they're making it more comfortable with like lounge chairs and couches and coffee and trying to really like draw people in and stay there and kind of hang out. Is really what millennials, Gen Z, and it's what the expectation is, that when you go into a commercial building that you can hang out. It's kind of like a lounge. And so commercial building lobbies make a lot of sense. Convention centers make a lot of sense. Certainly we're looking at stadiums. So when people go to games, a lot of times they have to jump out if they're there for work, they have to jump out for a call so there's all kinds of use cases. Really our target demographic are mobile workers. Other people, again, we're democratized across, anyone can use it, but mobile workers are our target demographic. So we see college, actually we're talking to a college campus now about setting them up across different areas within the campus so that you can have your own private space, whether it's for studying or whether it's for, I think podcast was actually one of the use cases. Cool. And the thing is that as we densify, we want to create this membership subscription base where you can enter whether you may only fly through an airport once a month or once a quarter or once a year, but you may go to the college campus, and if we're on the college campus, you may access that multiple times per week. And then you go to a mall and you have access in the mall, and then you go to a retail storefront, and whether it be a coffee purveyor or a co-working purveyor, and you have access there. So it's really creating this ecosystem of on-demand and reservable space.
That's really cool.
So we've seen on your company's website, you have sold Jabbrrboxes to big companies like Audible and NBA. And I know we talked about this earlier, but how do you go about finding a partner or company to sell the Jabbrrbox to? So I know you talked about just two ways of selling them. Either you can actually, why don't you talk about the...
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I love to hear other people talk about it. So, if I go back to the story of what our premise of our business was, this space as a service is kind of what people are starting to commonly call us and refer to us and other services within space. Basically, we went into the market, and in order for us to provide this service, we needed a physical product. We needed a modular space. And after doing an extensive survey of other type of products in the market, we realized that there was nothing out there that was intentionally designed or engineered for public space. So we set out to build our own product. As we built our own product, we were sought out, in fact, because of the level of performance and durability for people's private offices. So I think you mentioned a couple earlier that had reached out to us because they had the problem with privacy within their office. So we started selling our product as furniture without technology, and that was the vehicle to finance our business until we could start going into public space. So really, within our corporate sales of furniture has been a vehicle thus far. That's a kind of a completely different sales cycle, sales process. But to go into the public environment, airports are certainly the partner company that we look for. And we actually have airports reaching out to us. We have different environments, different commercial landlords, different types of convention, hospitality groups reaching out to us, and some that are really well-known global brand names reaching out and saying, well, this is really interesting what you guys are doing, because they see our service and amenity as something that can amplify or enhance their brand and their experience.
Of course. How soon can we expect one to come to a Washington, D.C. airport?
We've definitely spoken to them before, the authority down there. So probably, I can't give you a definitive date, but it will be sooner than later. And there's a few other applications within the DC metro area that are really interesting. When you start thinking about the different types of retail that you have there, certainly within your commercial buildings and the urban landscape, there's a lot of different use cases. So we're not there yet, but we will be in the not too distant future.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll be looking out. So we've touched on it here and there, but who are your specific customers, and how do you guys go about identifying them and then engaging with them?
Now, so we're really a B2B2C company, right? I don't know if you've heard that terminology, but it seems to be very of the moment. People are like, oh, we're a B2B2C company. And
for those of you who might not know what he's talking about, a B2B2C just stands for a business-to-business to consumer e-commerce model, and that combines your typical business-to-business and business-to-consumer models into one to form a complete product or service transaction. And by definition, it's a collaboration process that creates mutually beneficial service and product delivery channels.
Right. The fact is that our partners and customers, so if you think about the big environments, so airports, buildings, convention centers, those are, there are, I think, 75 airports in the U.S. that we definitely want to be in. It's pretty easy to kind of figure out who to call and reach out to them and market them. We also attend different trade shows, and really, it's kind of old-fashioned, like press the flesh. Like go up and introduce yourself and what your concept is, and really try to get them to actively identify with the problem you're solving. Right. Now, as far as the consumer experience, so there are customers too, right? So even if we're, going into a hotel lobby, we have to first convince the hotel brand that they need us, and then we have to, engage with the consumer. And like I said, that demographic is primarily going to be mobility workers, and our goal is to, one of the more difficult things to do, I think, in today's economy is to influence or change consumer behavior. You have huge brands that are spending, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to influence behavior through social and through traditional, terrestrial radio, social media, traditional print ads, all that kind of stuff. And some are really successful at it, and others failed miserably, and they both spend hundreds of millions of dollars. So we actually aren't trying to necessarily change consumer behavior. We're trying to, our goal is to really work within existing customer bases, and what do some of these people have in common? So maybe there's different large member organizations that they're part of. So if you think about within the airport space and traveler space, there's certain programs, whether it's an airport loyalty card program, or you have different member organizations that you can get through different credit cards, that they're already in that club. They're already doing those things, and we become, for us, we want to be another option. We want to be optionality of a better choice. So how do we give them the 10x better solution to their problem? Like if I need to find privacy in an airport, what are my options? I have free space. Well, that kind of sucks. I have lounges, which are great for some, and they're really good for free drinks and food and kind of a place to get away, but they're not great for privacy or productivity. And then after that, I have kind of like restaurants and that's kind of it. So if we can give them a solution that is just part of their choices. It's not their only choice. It's not their, but it's 10 times better than those other choices when they need us. Then I think we'll be successful.
Right. And it's just about making the customers see that aspect of your company.
Yeah. So it's definitely there are different. There's some marketing that has to be over the brand awareness. And part of, I think one of our biggest challenges is that we have to be in people's faces and we have to be available when they need us, where they need us.
Right.
What has been the hardest challenge you faced while starting your company so far?
Only one.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say one of the hardest challenges is that in my mind, there's so many definitions of being an entrepreneur, but I think one of them that rings true every day is that you face so many challenges, and so many entrepreneurs don't stop or quit when other people do. So you face so many challenges, and you're wired and meant to figure out how to get through it. And that's what you do. So sometimes you come up with the best solution to get through it. Sometimes you just barely make it through, but you make it through. That's kind of how I delineate. So I think one of the biggest challenges, one of the hardest challenges to date, is that you're solving a very distinct problem in your mind initially, and you have to validate that other people have the same kind of problem. And then you see the solution so clearly. And sometimes you're just a little early. Sometimes you see, I think Henry Ford has a quote that I refer to a lot. If people wanted, what is this?
People wanted faster horses, right?
Yes. And that's,
I remember that was in one of your emails.
Yeah. Well, I think about that all the time, because I think if you gave people what you wanted, if I gave people what they asked for, they'd get faster horses.
Yeah,
instead of a car. And I think that even in I've seen so many interviews with Travis, the founder of Uber, or any of these kind of massively game-changing ideas. And even when you look at companies whether it's in flex space, WeWork and Spaces and Serendipity and Breather and all these guys, you see the solutions, and you're kind of building and building and building the solution that sometimes they're not quite ready for. So you have to, I'd say that's one of the hardest things is you ask yourself every day, am I solving a problem that other people care enough about? Or am I solving something that they're going to experience? They're going to see that this is a solution. So I think that's kind of, a big challenge. And as an entrepreneur and as a founder, you want to move fast, and whether it's move fast and break things, or you want to learn, you want to iterate, you want to challenge the status quo. Sometimes you kind of have to slow down to go faster, and that's innately not how you're wired, but you have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
So the younger generation often sees entrepreneurs as not just making money, but having an opportunity to make the world a bit better, kind of like what we were just talking about. What are your thoughts on entrepreneurship and its social impact?
I think even going back to that earlier point around having all these jobs at an early age and kind of gaining that self-confidence and self-belief, I firmly believe that business and the idea of capitalism exists to improve the world around us.
Yeah.
There truly is no better vehicle to impact the world than pursuing your passion through a capitalistic manner. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think the business is kind of the tool, right? I mean, you can identify all these social injustices, and you can identify whether it's poverty or homelessness or these people all these social injustices that are happening in the world, but you don't have a platform to really, I think, advocate on their behalf, make impact. It's through business, and I think it's through entrepreneurship for the most part, but also just I think in business in general, the private sector, that's where you get things done, and that's why you see most of the more successful, whether it's, and I hate to use politicians, but some of the more successful. Don't want to go into the political realm at all. That's a totally different podcast, right?
Yeah.
But most of
we actually just had a politician on, though.
What's that?
We actually had a politician who was an entrepreneur on.
Well, I was going to say, most of the more successful politicians came from the private sector, and they're entrepreneurs, and they bring that mindset, and that's how they make change.
Our most recent episode is with Mr. John Delaney, who's a state rep in Maryland, and his point of view is the exact same, that he thought entrepreneurship, he was bringing to the table of his platform entrepreneurship as one of the main points, because he feels that it alone can, influencing entrepreneurs can help change a lot of the problems that we face, because there's so many people with good ideas.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, he actually also came from the private sector too. He's CEO of 2 companies or so, I think. So exactly what you were saying.
There's certainly truth to it. So I think they really go hand in hand as far as the social side and the entrepreneurial side as well.
What has been the most surprising thing you've learned while working on Jabbrrbox?
That's a good question. I think that I have another quote, which this quote I actually remember pretty well. That difficult things take time, and impossible things just take a little longer. A mentor of mine actually given me that, or told me that quote probably 15 years ago at this point, and I probably refer to it half a dozen to a dozen times a week, because it really, to me, it kind of goes surprising and hardest things about being an entrepreneur, in my mind, somewhat similar. And I think when you look at what it takes to be successful, there's a certain amount of persistence and patience, and they feel like they're opposing forces, being persistent, pushing through, pushing yourself, pushing to get to that client, pushing to figure out that algorithm problem, whatever that is, but also being patient. So they feel like they're opposing forces, but they really work hand in hand, and they're well aligned. And I think those are the tools that you need to be successful as an entrepreneur, as probably as a good human being, certainly as a family member or as a parent.
Mm-hmm. And pretty much speaking to what you were just talking about, we ask all of our guests what they think is the most important skill for a young entrepreneur like ourselves to have or to learn over the course of our lives to be successful.
Sure, and that's always a great way to kind of end as well. But I think that people are. What I love about your podcast is that you lead with passion, and you talk about entrepreneurs and passion. I think passion is the single most important skill feeling, like this essence of who you are, because that passion leads to curiosity, and that curiosity will ultimately lead you in a direction. And sometimes that direction leads you to success, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think you have to define what success is. And in my stage of life, in my stage of entrepreneurship and being a human and all these things, success to me means being able to be, truly passionate about what you're doing and being able to allocate time to those passions. So the passions for me include my business for sure, but my family, and being able to be where I want to be, when I want to be, how, and with who. And I think those, like, if you can choose those things and surround yourselves with those, then you're going to be successful. And you're going to find out that, like, it's not all like the shiny objects. It's not the cars, the houses, the ability to, travel all the time or do whatever. It's that secret to having it all is believing you already do. So it's kind of an interesting path, but I think it starts with passion. So that's, I think I've probably given a few. I don't want to get on a soapbox. My kids will be like, "Dad, what are you doing?" But I don't think there's a single most important skill for a young entrepreneur. I think it's being really well equipped to understand you're going to learn like those tangible skills, whether that's coding or language, or you're going to learn things like that. But on the emotional side, curiosity and passion and being able to bring that all to the table is going to inevitably leave you in a happy place, which, by the way, will grow to other people, and that will create whatever success is for you.
Right. And the reason we lead off with our opening statement about especially being passionate about what you do, because without passion, there's no real drive to get what you do done. So that's why we believe that's so important for entrepreneurs. You have to be really passionate about what you want to do.
I think you guys are dead on, and I really commend you guys for this, because I think that when I was your age, like Sam was talking about a little earlier, I just think that what you're doing is incredible, and everyone has access and ability to do a lot of different things. It's the people that actually do it and figure out what was great about it, what was so difficult, like what was hard, what would they do again, and starting that at a really early age, young age, it's going to propel you that much further. I think everyone starts doing things a little different on different schedules, but hopefully, I'm sure your podcast is helping a lot of people start thinking about things differently at an earlier stage, which is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this. We really, really appreciate this.
Awesome, guys. I thank you, and good luck, and I can't wait to see what you guys do in the future.
Thank you.
And I plan on doing a paid internship at a financial investment firm. So it's a lot of what we talk about we're trying to actually preach in our own lives, and we're trying to encourage you guys as listeners to get out there and actually do something with your time, because we know a lot of you are young. We know a lot of you have ideas, and the best thing about summer is you have all the time. Every day is the same. Every day is a weekend, so you have something to do. And if you don't, then I highly encourage you to go out and try to brainstorm something that you can do, because there's so many opportunities out there.
Yeah. So we're also, in addition to interning or working at places, we're also traveling. I'm going to be going to London, and we're trying to take a trip together to Toronto as well.
Yeah, so I've never been to Toronto, but I want to go. I want to experience what it's like. So we're just doing a lot of some vacationing, try to get away from where we live, because it's not the most entertaining place in the world. But that's a big thing about entrepreneurs is traveling can teach you a lot of things, a lot of skills. And as you guys just heard in this episode, there's a lot of stuff to come for travelers even. As we just talked about with one of the co-founders of Jabbrrbox, which is really cool, and it's not everywhere yet, but I really feel like it will blow up
Yeah,
pretty soon.
expected to see it at like almost all the airports. And actually, yeah, I've been really wanting to taking Tony to Toronto for a while now. I'm kind of like a native there. I've been there a lot of times, and I feel like it's finally time to take Tony up to the city because he's never been. And yes, I'm pretty excited for that because actually when I was there, I saw this cool kind of like Jabbrrbox like space, but meant for podcasting or music recording. So I was hoping to like I don't know, maybe record an episode while we're up there or something like that, and do like a lot of marketing up there as well.
Yeah, because we really want to expand outside of the U.S. and try to reach as many people as we can. And there's a lot of opportunity up in Canada and
Yeah, just get more listeners.
places that are close to the U.S.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and as always, you can find us on the major podcast services like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Additionally, you guys can follow us on Instagram at Young Entrepreneurs. The same goes for Facebook. Please join our Facebook group. We really want to get that started, get young entrepreneurs talking and involved, because when you're in a cohesive space like Facebook, and I know that they're really trying to build out the pages and groups and communities, and it's really been working. So if you guys want to join ours, be sure to do so. We're going to really try to start posting a lot of stuff in there, a lot of insight, try to get some conversation going. So make sure to click the link. It'll take you to all of our links. We also have a website up now if you guys haven't checked it out. It's just youngentrepreneurs.com. Just type it in your search bar and it'll take you right to it.
Find all our episodes on there. If you want to come on a show, if you have your own business or something, or want advice from us, there's a contact page on there. So hit us up.
And lastly, you can follow us on Twitter at Y Entrepreneurs. And like Akash said, we'll see you in the next episode.